In the military, a place where steel discipline and courage are forged, no one expected that the most horrifying stories would arise from the very dark corners of the soul and forgotten spaces. Serving in the military is a sacred oath, a testament to patriotism. But hidden beneath that halo are nameless dangers, whispers from the dead, and invisible eyes always lurking in the shadows. Robert, a young man, formerly a specialist in the United States Army, who left the service not only with physical scars, but also with a shadow clinging tightly to his soul. For safety and privacy, we know him only as Robert, but what he experienced at Fort Campbell in 1988 surpassed any nightmare a soldier could imagine. Many veterans carry memories of war, the sound of gunfire, the smell of smoke, and the screams on the battlefield. But for Robert, what he brought back was far more terrifying. An unnamed entity, an invisible curse haunting his every dream. Night shift at Fort Campbell. The name sounds like a campfire story, but it was the beginning of a terrifying chain of events where the line between life and death was blurred by forces beyond comprehension. Imagine a thick, cold fog creeping through the forests surrounding the military base, as if the very earth and sky were whispering a warning no one dared to hear. Through that fog, Robert once heard footsteps, not those of his comrades, but of something silent, slow, like it was hunting in the dark night. As an expert in supernatural phenomena, I have read hundreds of classified reports, from skinwalkers lurking near outposts to the ghosts of fallen soldiers still patrolling in the mist, and Fort Campbell is no exception. There's something out here, Robert once whispered to a comrade during a night shift, his voice trembling. I feel it watching me through the window, but there's nothing out there but darkness. Science may deny it, people may avoid it, but I know well. The military is a place where intense energies converge. Life, death, fear, and sometimes portals to other dimensions. Robert wasn't the only one who sensed the strangeness. Other soldiers also told of knocks on doors with no source, or figures gliding past in mirrors when no one was standing there. I don't believe in ghosts, Robert used to tell himself to stay calm. But deep down, he knew. What he faced did not belong to this world. His story began on a cold night in 1988, when the fog was thicker than ever, and the wind whistling through the barracks sounded like the soft laughter of an unseen entity. As a young soldier enlisted in 1984, Robert grew up in the shadow of the Vietnam War, a memory still painful in America's psyche, like an unhealed wound. We saw the war on TV, heard about it in school. He recounted in a low, sad voice. But nobody told me that war wasn't just about bombs and bullets, but also about other things. That night, while standing guard in a secluded corner of Fort Campbell, Robert felt an unusual cold draft, as if someone, or something, was standing right behind him, breathing on his neck. He turned around, but saw only darkness. A darkness that seemed alive, moving, and observing him with eyes he couldn't see. They're not just out there in the dark, Robert once whispered to himself during a sleepless night. They're also here, within the ranks, watching me. But then his voice dropped, as if pulled into an abyss. Even after 30 years, those memories still cling to me, growling in the shadows of my mind, refusing to let go. 3 of Robert's 4 terrifying stories occurred between 1987 and 1988 at Fort Campbell, a vast military base straddling the border between Kentucky and Tennessee, where the darkness seemed more alive than anywhere else. Fort Campbell lies west of the Cumberland Plateau, a land soaked in blood and tears from the massacres of Champ Ferguson during the Civil War, where the spirit of violence still lingers in every tree, every gust of wind. Less than an hour's drive south is Kelly, where the Sutton family faced the Kentucky Goblins in 1955. Hideous creatures with glowing eyes and claws like razors. "Something's not right about this place," Robert once mumbled when he first set foot on Fort Campbell, a cold chill running down his spine that he couldn't explain. "This land is like a supernatural magnet, attracting strange entities, nameless curses, and mysteries beyond human understanding." Robert arrived at Fort Campbell in January 1987, after a short deployment in Central America, where he had smelled the faint scent of death, but had never seen a ghost. From the 27th Engineer Battalion Airborne at Fort Bragg, he was unexpectedly transferred to the 101st Airborne Division. Little did he know that here, he would step into a nightmare that even war couldn't compare to. Born and raised in Tennessee, not far from Fort Campbell, Robert thought being stationed close to home was a gift. Near family, near the familiar forests of his childhood. But that familiarity soon became a curse, as strange alien things began to lurk, turning his homeland into a labyrinth of fear. Fort Campbell is suffocatingly large, nearly 165 square miles, over 427 square kilometers, far larger than San Francisco 3 times over, nearly half the size of New York City. A giant, untamable wilderness kingdom. "Why is this important?" Robert emphasized, his eyes flashing with caution. "Because unlike cities, this place is mostly dense forest, wasteland, where darkness reigns. Only a small corner of the base is used as a training ground. Echoing gunfire, exploding grenades, roaring artillery. The rest is thousands of acres of ancient, dense forest, where even sunlight struggles to penetrate. Wilderness areas like these are havens for entities seeking concealment, skinwalkers, goblins, or lost souls still wandering from days of bloodshed. My specialty was communications," Robert explained, a hint of surprise in his voice. "My job usually kept me within 4 walls, fixing radios, listening to the static of machines. But fate pushed him outside, into those deep forests, under the pitch-black night sky. A change, as if the darkness itself had chosen him as prey." A few months after arriving at the 101st Airborne Division, Robert received a temporary assignment with the Military Police Battalion. A turn of events that made his heart beat faster with excitement. "It was an interesting change," he admitted, a fleeting smile on his lips. "Instead of hugging broken radios, I got to patrol, explore the hidden corners of the base." Fort Campbell unfolded before him with thousands of dilapidated buildings, hundreds of miles of roads, from wide avenues to narrow dirt tracks winding into the fringes where lights couldn't reach. Those secondary roads, rough, dark, led to forgotten areas, where human control vanished like mist before a cold wind. Night patrol duty on those remote roads was something no one wanted, but Robert got drawn into it, receiving considerably more than my fair share, as he once bitterly said. "Don't get me wrong," he chuckled softly, a hint of pride in his voice. "I actually enjoyed it, driving through the woods, feeling the darkness surround me. After the short deployment in Central America, where he only caught a whiff of war, these night shifts were a balm for the peacetime soldiers craving for action. I felt alive again," Robert once whispered to himself as the wheels rolled over dirt and rock, like a real soldier, no longer a useless shadow. But it was this very openness, this desire to overcome boredom, that inadvertently turned him into a beacon attracting the entities hidden in the darkness. Those lurking, waiting. "I grew up around here," he added, his deep voice tinged with confidence. "The dirt roads, the wind through the trees. It was all as familiar as my own breath." But he didn't expect that this very comfort was the perfect trap, leading him deeper into the land where nameless whispers began to echo from the shadows. As he moved away from the flickering lights and noise of the paved roads, Robert saw the night sky open up before him, a sparkling, cold tapestry of stars. seeming to whisper secrets from afar. I liked being out in the deep woods, in the dark, he recounted, a hint of excitement in his voice. Even if it was just driving on designated routes, checking locked gates, I still thought it was great. But not everyone shared that joy. Sometimes, Robert was paired with comrades who feared the silence of the deep woods more than death itself. There were some city boys, he smirked, recalling them. They hated being sent out, hated the feeling of being lost on dirt roads miles from any light. I found their fear amusing, he said, his voice lowering. They were almost panicked, as if the deep woods could swallow them whole at any moment. I was different, Robert affirmed, his eyes showing confidence. Although sometimes I too felt a cold chill run down my spine when alone in the dark. The darkness at Fort Campbell wasn't just the absence of light. It was heavy, alive, like an ancient entity breathing, lurking, waiting for careless prey. But honestly, he confessed, a smile flashing like a brief light in the night. That very creepy feeling made everything more interesting. The silence of the night patrols was just a fragile veneer, hiding a nightmare stirring awake from the depths of the forest. Most of the time, we were just two regular soldiers, Robert described, his voice even, like recalling a distant dream, carrying sidearms, rifles, driving an old olive-drab SUV. Their duty was mind-numbingly simple. Check fences, shake locks, glance at old dust-covered buildings, ghosts of the past forgotten in the deep woods. The base was so large that each checkpoint was a 10-minute drive apart, through rough dirt roads where the engine noise was swallowed by the darkness. They would stop, get out, tug hard on the padlock, look around, a repetitive sequence like a monotonous dance under the faint moonlight. Occasionally, they encountered people. Strange figures gliding through the night like misplaced pieces of a story no one wanted to tell. Once caught a guy meeting his girlfriend by the fence, Robert chuckled. But weirder was his buddy standing there, eyes glued to them like a ghost. Then one night, I saw a guy jogging at midnight, naked except for his shoes, he recounted, his voice tinged with amazement. He said it was a druid ritual, some religion involving the forest. He looked at me like I was the crazy one, Robert quipped, shaking his head, remembering the guy's strange gaze, as if Robert himself was the outsider in the darkness. Sometimes, they caught mischievous kids of soldiers, spray painting old walls, scribbles like curses written by children's hands. Sometimes, signs of intruders were clear. Ashes from a campfire, a cut fence, or the distant echo of footsteps that had already vanished. More rarely, they encountered homeless people, desperate figures sneaking into abandoned buildings with some remaining electricity, seeking temporary shelter from the biting cold of the dark night. Most of the buildings out there had nothing of value, Robert explained, his voice even like recalling an old dream. But sometimes, we'd still see a broken window or faint footprints of an intruder. It was the possibility of encountering nameless figures in the dark that made Robert uneasy whenever checking areas with buildings. Dense, hidden corners where light died and fear lurked. But there was one place. His voice suddenly dropped, heavy as if carrying a curse. So creepy that even in daylight it gave you chills. And we had to check it every night. It was a massive, rectangular area, enclosed by sharp concertina wire, containing a graveyard of cars. Old, wrecked, rusty hulks, lying silent like metal skeletons in the deep woods. This area stored the property of soldiers away on long deployments, cars, belongings from the barracks, all left behind, covered in dust, like memories erased from the world. Additionally, there were heavy, gleaming military machines, strangely contrasting with the decaying civilian cars, a mix of life and death in the same space. The worst one had license plates from the early 70s, Robert recalled, his voice trembling slightly. Tires flat, interior reeking of decay, as if time had swallowed it. They told me, he recounted, his voice low and sad like wind whistling through a graveyard. These cars belonged to soldiers who went to Vietnam, killed in action or missing, never returned, never claimed. They lay there, rusty metal tombstones, whispering of souls yet unreleased. A chilling warning in the heart of a peacetime base. I don't know if the Army tried to preserve them, but after 15 years, maybe nobody cared anymore. Only gloom and oblivion remained. Places like this, soaked in loss and abandonment, are ideal havens for supernatural entities, drawing energy from the lingering pain. Sadly, that very desolation made it prime bait for thieves and vandals. That's why his patrol team had to guard it, protecting the metal ghosts from the hands of the living, even though they themselves felt the bone-chilling cold from this lot. We checked it every night, he explained. Because besides the old cars, there were a few warehouses storing military equipment, stuff still in use, but surrounded by death. The lot was suffocatingly large. Enough space for 24 football fields, Robert estimated, surrounded by a 12-foot fence, topped with coiled concertina wire like the teeth of a giant beast. Usually, they just drove around, sweeping spotlights across the chain-link fence, the weak light struggling to pierce the thick darkness, searching for unusual signs. But one night in June, Robert recounted, his voice suddenly tense like a guitar string. Everything changed. As we passed the old car section, Wireman, my buddy driving, suddenly yelled, "Hey, did you see that?" Wireman growled, hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. "See what?" Robert replied, squinting through the windshield, his heart starting to race, though he saw nothing but pitch black night. "There." Wireman slammed on the brakes, the vehicle stopping with a screech, his hand pointing to a shadowy figure among the cars. Something that had just darted past, swift as wind, cold as death. Their patrol vehicle was equipped with 2 huge auxiliary spotlights, mounted on the side mirrors, like the glaring eyes of a predator in the dark night. They swiveled the lights, beams of white cutting through the darkness, trying to expose what was hiding among the old cars. But it always stayed distant, like a ghost teasing the light. Every time the light swept near, Robert recalled, his voice dropping as if choked by darkness. It ducked away, staying low, hiding behind the car hulks. Quick, smart, without hesitation. This wasn't a wild animal. It had awareness, strategy, a cold intelligence that would make anyone's heart tremble. Definitely not an animal, Robert whispered to himself, the hair on his neck standing on end as the thought flashed through his mind like a warning from the unseen realm. Following procedure, Wireman continued operating the spotlights, while Robert gripped the radio, his voice dry, reporting to dispatch, investigating possible trespasser at location, code number. "I didn't know what specifics to report," he admitted, a hint of confusion in his voice. "I thought it was just some kids messing around, or at worst, a clumsy thief." But deep down, he knew. If it wasn't teens or homeless people, then the lurking thing could be a threat far beyond any normal assessment. They drove a little further, wheels crunching on gravel, then pulled over near the main gate, the heavy iron barrier separating them from the eerie space within. Robert got out, left hand gripping a flashlight, right hand holding a jingling set of keys, each seeming to carry the curse of a forgotten lock. "Probably each one opens a damn lock on this base," he muttered, irritably trying each key, his hand trembling as the headlights from the vehicle shone on his back. He kept looking up, sweeping the flashlight beam over the fence, trying to spot the intruder. But the vehicle lights were too bright, turning the surrounding darkness into a solid black wall, swallowing everything. Wireman also got out, standing behind the open door, right hand swiveling the auxiliary spotlight, left hand sweeping his flashlight along the fence, his eyes tense, as if sensing something was about to happen. Finally, the lock clicked open with a dry sound. Robert pulled the heavy chain, pushed the gate open with a screech, like the cry of an imprisoned soul. He glanced back, saw Wireman getting into the driver's seat, ready to drive in. But before he could step through the gate, a horrific sound tore through the night. A long, sharp, bone-chilling scream echoed from ahead. Not far, as if it was standing right there, looking straight at him through the darkness. Robert grew up in the countryside. He'd camped, heard all sorts of forest sounds, but never anything as terrifying as this. It wasn't human, he affirmed, eyes wide with primal fear, but something fierce, ancient, as if it had just risen from hell. I don't know what Wireman thought, he recounted, but a cold chill ran down my spine. My body froze. The hair on my neck stood on end like someone had touched me from behind. He stood frozen, foot suspended mid-step, heart pounding. The fight-or-flight instinct flared, but was choked into silence by the darkness before him. The area in front of Robert seemed to stretch out, extending endlessly into the deep darkness, as if space itself was distorted by fear, or an unseen force was manipulating reality. He felt the tunnel vision gripping him, the pounding of his heart drowning out all other sounds, a terrifying effect he fought hard to resist. Carefully, Robert backed up a few steps, moving away from the open gate, his eyes scanning left and right, trying to pierce the darkness for whatever was lurking. Though he didn't know what made the scream, he was sure of one thing. Terror gripped his chest, cold as the hand of death. Suddenly, other screams erupted, ghastly, inhuman, echoing one after another from across the lot, like a hellish choir responding in the darkness. Robert's mind raced, desperately seeking a logical explanation, but failing miserably. No reason could explain the nightmare unfolding before him. When stress is extreme, the military trains you to revert to basic instincts. Focus, don't quit, even if your heart feels like it's going to explode. Robert started analyzing. He whispered to himself, 5, 6 screams, more than we thought. How many more were hiding, silent? A chilling realization crept through his mind. They were outnumbered, far exceeding the 2 small soldiers standing under the headlights. And they were watching, hunting. I cursed myself, Robert hissed through clenched teeth. Standing here like stupid prey, brightly lit by the vehicle lights, too easy for them to target. It all happened in just a few short seconds, but each moment felt like an eternity. He shoved the keys into his left hand, his right hand drawing his pistol in pure reflex. Wireman, as if reading his mind, jumped out of the vehicle, pistol in hand, aimed straight into the darkness where the screams echoed. His eyes wild, full of caution. Robert backed up further, eyes scanning frantically, closing the distance to the passenger door of the truck, the last refuge between them and the horror approaching. Another scream, closer, fiercer, erupted from the exact spot the first one came from, as if it was advancing, eager to devour them. And then, in the deep darkness, a massive figure stood upright amidst the old cars. Tall, dark, like a nightmare sprung to life from the rusty metal. Oh my God, Robert screamed in his head, his heart skipping a beat. It was too tall. The cars only reached its waist, like toys at the feet of a giant. It stood motionless for what felt like an eternity, a terrifying dark silhouette, silently challenging them from afar, its unseen eyes drilling into his soul. Then it charged. "Oh no!" Robert gasped, his voice breaking in terror as the figure tore through the air, closing the 100-yard distance with impossible speed. This wasn't human, wasn't animal, but something beyond nature, an entity carrying the breath of darkness and death. Robert's legs finally reacted. He and Wireman scrambled into the truck in panic, the doors slamming shut like a final prayer in the night. Wireman yanked the wheel hard left, the front of the truck swinging sharply towards the main road. He floored the gas pedal, tires screeching like a cry for help in the dark night. The vehicle sped away, dirt and rocks spraying under the tires, but the terror in Robert's heart clung tight, refusing to let go. "We could have opened fire," he admitted, his voice trembling as if choked by darkness. But no matter how scared I was, I tried to cling to the idea that it was just some crazy homeless people or drunk kids. "I have never been more wrong," he whispered bitterly, eyes wide as the horrific memory flooded back like a tidal wave. The road they were on ran parallel to the fence, less than 6 feet away. Robert glanced through the open window, and his heart nearly stopped at what he saw. It ran parallel to the vehicle, just beyond the fence, only 10 feet away. A massive, hairy, muscular form, moving at unbelievable speed, like a hunting specter in its fury. On reflex, Robert raised his flashlight, the white beam hitting it directly. And what he saw wasn't human, wasn't anything he had ever known. It stood upright, running on 2 legs, taller than the 12-foot fence, at least 8 feet, maybe more, towering over Robert's own 6'2" frame. Covered in short, dark brown, thick fur, a rounded head, unlike a human's, a face shiny like bear skin, no bear muzzle, not flat like a gorilla's. "It's not an animal," Robert mumbled, his voice lost in panic. "Agile, powerful, unlike anything I've ever seen. This could be Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or a cryptid from classified files. A living entity beyond nature, carrying the breath of ancient darkness. Its hips were wide, pelvis thick, legs sturdy but short compared to its massive upper body. Its running gait was stiff, without arm swing, very unlike a human. Though the vehicle accelerated, it kept pace, its muscular legs pumping furiously, primal strength propelling it like a machine of destruction. Its breathing was audible, heavy, rapid, overpowering the engine noise. Deep growls escaping its chest, like a threat from the realm of the dead. When the flashlight beam hit its face, Robert froze. It wasn't looking ahead. Its dark, glowing eyes were fixed on him, burning with rage. "It's looking at me!" he screamed internally, heart pounding. Not the eyes of a wild animal, but something conscious, hostile. The eyes didn't reflect light like a deer's, but in his panic, he briefly saw, or imagined, the whites of its eyes, like human eyes. "I swear," he said, his voice trembling but certain. It had whites in its eyes, not animal, not human, but something in between. That detail, if true, was horrific proof. This wasn't just a creature, but an intelligent entity, embodying the spirit of destruction. The vehicle sped on, but it kept pace, its growls mixing with the wind. A living nightmare, relentlessly chasing the 2 small soldiers in the night. Suddenly, Wireman roared something unintelligible, shattering the panic in Robert's head, pulling him back to reality. Adrenaline surged, burning through every muscle fiber. He glanced at Wireman, heart clenching with fear. Was there another monster chasing on the driver's side, hidden in the dark? But no. Wireman's face was rigid with shock, eyes wide, mirroring the same terror in Robert's heart. He was watching the road, glancing out his window, trying to keep the truck from plunging into the black abyss. The chase had only lasted seconds, but now, the vehicle finally gained enough speed to leave the horrific thing behind in the darkness. Robert looked back one last time, and a wave of fear mixed with astonishment washed over him. It leaped over the 12-foot fence like a ghost defying gravity. With incredible strength, it swung itself over the top of the fence, the concertina wire flashing under the headlights. An unnervingly easy jump, as if it were born to overcome any barrier. But instead of landing lightly, it crashed down in a heap. Must have gotten tangled in the wire, Robert thought. A faint flicker of hope in his mind. Through the open window, he saw it struggling to get up, growling angrily, limbs flailing as if pulling the tangled concertina wire from the top of the fence down to the ground with it. The vehicle sped down the dark road, no one saying a word. A heavy silence enveloped them, broken only by the roaring engine and the frantic beating of their hearts. The question hung between them. How do we report this? What do we say about that damn thing? But no one dared break the suffocating atmosphere. As if by reflex, wiremen drove straight to the next patrol point. Military discipline deeply ingrained, forcing them to continue their duty even with trembling hearts. They both knew, without saying it, they would have to go back and lock the gate they left open. A dangerous loose end, potentially revealing their carelessness, or worse, exposing the nightmare that had just occurred. Upon reaching the next patrol point, the radio crackled, dispatch asking, "Why didn't you clear the last location? Where's the suspected trespasser?" Robert, having learned a bitter lesson from the past, replied quickly, "Radio malfunction, Sarge. Nothing there. We'll check it back at the station." A smooth lie, but necessary for survival. Only when dawn broke, banishing some of the horrific darkness, did they dare return to the vehicle lot to lock the gate, hearts still heavy with doubt and fear. What they saw wasn't a hallucination, and physical evidence would confirm it, like an indelible curse. At the spot where the creature jumped over, they found the concertina wire torn from the fence, lying scattered and twisted on the ground, sharp and mangled, right where it fell. "No way we both imagined it," Robert mumbled, his voice trembling as he looked at the mangled wire. Vivid proof of an entity beyond reason. Wireman stood frozen, eyes glued to the evidence, his face pale. They knew, without speaking, the thing was real, and it had chosen them as prey in the dark night. The gate creaked as it was locked, but the creature's growls still echoed in their minds. A reminder that the darkness never truly leaves. Daylight brought a sliver of courage, prompting them to drive through the open gate one more time. But this time, both Robert and Wireman stayed inside the vehicle, pistols gripped tightly, ready to face the ghost of the previous night. They slowly circled the lot, tense eyes scanning every corner. But there was no further sign of the horrific thing, as if it had vanished into thin air, leaving only the torn concertina wire as proof. Wireman drove out. Robert jumped down, hands shaking as he locked the gate with the heavy chain. The click echoed like sealing a terrible secret. Then they drove straight back to the station. Robert's mind was made up. Not a word of this could get out. The Army doesn't forgive soldiers who see things beyond reason. Wireman nodded in agreement, his voice hoarse. "I'm not telling anyone." An unspoken oath between two men, bound by fear and silence. "I don't know if he kept his word," Robert admitted, his gaze distant. "But I'm sure I wasn't the only one haunted by that night." Back at the station, they reported briefly. Fence damaged, concertina wire pulled down. A half lie, concealing the nightmare still growling in their minds. After more than 30 years of thinking about it, Robert said in a low voice, as if recounting a curse, "If it had just been me, maybe I could have convinced myself it was a hallucination. The human mind has amazing defense mechanisms, ready to bury the inexplicable. But the truth stubbornly persists. It happened, he affirmed, his voice firm. Wireman saw it too. There's no way to deny it. The question haunted Robert like a ghost. What was it that we saw? An unanswered mystery, lingering in his mind for 3 decades. Bigfoot? He mumbled, a faint smile flickering. The word sounds like a joke. Who believes it depends on who you ask? But then again, he countered, his voice sharp. Some people wouldn't believe the truth if it stood right in front of them, roaring in their ears. Honestly, Robert confessed, his eyes showing a mix of confusion and fear. I don't know what else to call it. A group of Bigfoot, maybe a whole family of them. His description matches thousands of reports. Tall, hairy, bipedal, a living cryptid, challenging all skepticism of the modern world. But the bigger question lingered. Were they just passing through? Or has that lot been their territory for a long time? The thought sent a chill down Robert's spine. As an expert, I know. Wilderness areas like Fort Campbell are often havens for ancient entities. And if it was their territory, they had crossed a boundary that shouldn't have been crossed. Sometimes I wonder, Robert whispered, his voice lost in memory, if they ever came back looking for us, or if they were always there, waiting. The torn concertina wire wasn't just evidence. It was a warning from another world, where humans are not the dominant species. The gate was locked, but the fear remained wide open. A secret between 2 soldiers, buried under the light of day, but alive in the eternal darkness. I still had to go back and check that lot full of junk every night, Robert mumbled, his voice heavy as if carrying an inescapable. Not a single night did he feel less afraid. Every time the wheels rolled over the dirt road, he imagined giant figures lurking in the shadows, waiting to punish the trespasser. If it was Bigfoot, he mused, eyes reflecting curiosity mixed with horror, why did it charge us instead of running away, like most stories say? Most Bigfoot reports describe them as shy, elusive. But then, a chilling thought crept into his mind. Maybe the nice stories are all that's left, because no one survives to tell about the aggressive ones. Deadly encounters might be buried deep in the woods, where the last scream merges with the wind, unheard by anyone. I've heard other stories, Robert continued, his voice lowering as if sharing a dark secret, about people disappearing in the woods, hiking, camping, then vanishing without a trace. It gives me chills, he admitted, hands tightening as if trying to ward off the memory. If they didn't get lost or have an accident, what took them? That thought haunts me the most, he whispered, eyes clouded with undiminished fear. If I had been alone that night, if that thing had caught us, what would have happened? Unanswered questions spun in his head every night as he lay in bed, eyes wide open staring at the ceiling, waiting for sleep that never truly brought peace. It's unfortunate, he concluded, a hint of bitterness in his voice. Telling this story probably won't help my reputation. Who would believe a soldier saw a monster? But like I said from the beginning, he emphasized, his gaze sharp as a challenge. That wasn't the only strange thing I encountered on the dark roads of Fort Campbell. That promise hung in the air. A door opening to other, deeper nightmares, waiting to be revealed from the darkness.